So, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the somewhat forgotten history of the selection for the 1972 Summit Series roster for Team Canada. Now, it's most of it has been lost in through the annals of time, but the initial team that went to the Forum in a game one, and later on to Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver, and over to Ushnicki, wasn't the original team they had planned because of the WHA expansion. Now, most times when people talk about the roster, they kind of forget that the initial 35 players were announced approximately 2 months before the initial start of the season. Now, Team Canada's roster of 35 players was announced by coach and GM Harry Sinden on July 12, 1972, during a press conference in Toronto. Now, the initial roster included many of the best known players in the NHL, although a few, like Dave Keon, Johnny Busick, and others, were conspicuously absent. Changes were eventually made because of the obvious expansion with the WHA. Now, the initial three goalies were Esposito, Dryden, and Jerry Cheevers because Cheevers was considered a top five goalie at the time. He's shown great playoff, what do you call results. He was taken off the roster after he decided to join the WHA. Now, on defense, we had Bobby Orr, Don Awrey, Brad Park, Rod Searling, Serge Chavard, and Jocelyn Gabriel, Gary Bergman, and Pat Stapleton, and Bill White. Now, two defensemen from the Montreal Canadiens, J.C. Tremblay, who had great results in the Stanley Cup actually in 1971, scoring many big goals, also decided to jump to WHA. And the reliable defensive defenseman Jacques Laperriere was the goal, but his wife actually was pregnant at the time, and he felt that it'd be better if he stayed home to take care of his beautiful wife. Now, at center, uh, Esposito, Perot, Dion, Berenson, Rattel, and Bobby Clark, and of course the Boston Bruins stalwart Derek Sanderson. But again, going to the WHA, Sanderson name was dropped. Bobby Hull was initially asked to go, but was this what do you call disinvited after he decided to sign with WHA. Also on left wing, you had Bobby's talented brother Dennis, Peter Mahovlich, Frank Mahovlich, Wayne Cashman, John Paul Parise, Paul Henderson, Rick Hatfield, and Richard Martin. Now on right wing, you had Gilbert, Cornway, Ron Ellis, Mickey Redmond, and Bill Goldsworthy. Now, Sinden's announcement again created a lot of controversy because not only Keon wasn't there and Busick, Kenny Hodge and Jacques Lemaire, and in published reports at the time, Sinden said our main criterion in selecting this lineup was the need for balance. All the great teams of the past had one asset in common, that was balance. We'd write down a list of just the most publicized, high scoring players, and we realized we didn't really have a team. Hence, the roster included several grinders, some good back checkers, and a few defensive defensemen. Now, when the rules for about the tournament were first drawn up in April, the NHL maintained that any player taking part would have to be under contract before training camp began on August 13th. It was mainly an issue of insurance. At the time, no one in the NHL took the threat of WHA seriously. Then on the 27th of June, Hull signed with the Jets. Now, a lot of people felt that the WHA players should be allowed. Also, another player as well that's not talked about much, Jerry Pinder, a very good defensive player. Now, Bobby Hull was very upset by the snub, and on July 14th, Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau wrote to Clarence Campbell, to Hockey Canada President Charles Hay, and the NHLPA President Red Bearson, urging them to take whatever steps necessary to clear the way from Hull to play. Despite these efforts, Hull and the three other NHL stars who later signed with WHA teams, like I said, Cheevers, Tremblay, and Sanderson, had to be replaced. Now, Dennis Hull considered declining the roster spot, but fortunately, that He was talked out of it by his brother. Now, to replace Cheevers, we had Eddie Johnson. We had Brian Glennie, Guy Lapointe, late edition, uh, and Stan Mikita. Now, Gilbert Perreault, Dion, and a few other young players didn't really have a big chance to play in the series, which is kind of a bummer because they could easily have done well. Ron Ellis, as one of the grinders, had an overachieving series, and nobody would expect that Paul Henderson would be the superstar he was. Now, this is very interesting as well. Three players who had recently been drafted in the NHL: Billy Harris from the Islanders, John Van Boxmeer of the Montreal Canadiens, who was a Montreal prospect at one time, and a future Dryden backup, Michel Bonnet Larocque, attended training camp in order to balance scrimmages and inter squad games. Now, because of Bobby Orr's knee surgery, he couldn't play. To many, he would have been available for Game 8, but just on the power play. But pretty much it didn't work out that way. Not to say they didn't need him, but there were so many talented players on the team. He was kind of left out. Now, in hindsight, is 2020. The games that they lost could could Kenny Hodge, Buyck, Lemaire, especially Dave Keon, made a big difference? I think so. Yes. There was no way that Parise, Goldsworthy, Vic Hatfield, others like that should have been on the team because there were basically too much hotheads. Can you imagine Jacques Lemaire against the Russians in '72? Lemaire was pretty well nearing his prime as a player. He could have easily played defense and offense. Having Ron Ellis there with Bobby Clark was fine enough, but Jacques Lemaire could do what Ron Ellis did and could score goals as well. No disparity to Ron Ellis. Why would you have a 20 goal scorer in Ellis when you could have a 35 goal scorer in Jacques Lemaire? Johnny Busick with Esposito and Cashman, like an all Boston line, would be tremendous. But Bill White, come on, like I mean, Red Barrettson, yes, I understand because NHLPA, good team player. But overall, I think J.C. Tremblay not there, Sanderson not there. You didn't have your best team for Team Canada, where the Russians had the best team. So and it all worked out. I mean, Team Canada should have won and did win, but I don't think if the series would have won 12 games or 16 games, the Russians would have won many games after that because Team Canada players were in shape. They were playing as a team. Dryden had some bad games as so in net. Tony had some rough go. So overall, I think the Montreal Canadiens players on Team Canada made a difference. If you look at the big picture, Cornway, the Puma Hodges, Lapointe, Savard would have been Laperriere, would have been Tremblay. Team Canada was Team Montreal Canadiens for most of and the best players on the team were in Montreal Canadian players, and he augmented the best players on the team as well. Because look at Cornway, I mean, that's one of the biggest goals any Montreal Canadiens ever scored in the international play to make it 5-5 in Game 8. So on this COVID Sunday, I figured a little bit of background would help because a lot of people forget that Team Canada was fine tuned in '72. It wasn't what we wanted, but it's the best we could have done. But I mean, they were jealous of the WHA. Can you imagine Bobby Hull? Bobby Hull could have scored 14 goals. My God, Bobby Hull in '74 by himself. There's four of those games he almost won for Canada, three ties and a loss. I mean, it's the way it goes. Have a good day. Bye.